Welcome back to Seeds. So in this episode, I'll be talking about inside the mind of the mentally wounded. So again, this is talking from my own personal perspective, and again, as I've kind of reviewed how I deal with things and how I deal with pain, and in the process that it took on me, I feel like I can't be alone. I know that this doesn't apply to everyone who's been traumatically wounded mentally, but again, it's just something that I want to help people who are going through this, but I also want to help people who know somebody who's going through this or might know somebody who's going through this, because I feel like that is one of the biggest gaps in mental health and getting help and getting proper help is just miscommunication of people who haven't been through traumatic events. And I feel like it's extremely hard for people who haven't gone through traumatic events to understand or to fully understand what loved ones might be going through and what their responses or their actions or lack of actions mean. Again, this is just something that I've experienced with people around me and loved ones, and so I just feel a need to talk about it and to hopefully fill that void and get people who are going through pain or know someone who's going through pain so that they can actually help effectively rather than just be discouraged. So something that I've noticed that really alienated me from my loved ones, from friends that I've had since I was a little child, from family members and so forth, and even my wife and sometimes my kids, is that one thing I noticed was that, with my twin brother and his death, before my twin brother was killed, before he was, deployed to Iraq, I said I had a premonition, and I talked to him a couple of times about it, and I broke down and I told him I didn't think he was coming home. And then after he was deployed, there was a few occasions where my girlfriend at the time, now wife, I broke down to her and I told her I didn't think he was coming home. And then, the fateful day came when I was given the news. And again, if you haven't seen the episode with me talking about my pain, the birth of my depression, it was very difficult because the day that he was killed, I was coming home from Seattle, and I had got a phone call from my mom earlier that day, but she hadn't divulged anything. She wasn't emotional or anything. She just said, please come by the house before you hang out with your friends when you get back in town. And I landed in my home, where I live. I landed at the airport, and I was sitting, waiting to get picked up. And again, that premonition came back, and I broke down. I knew why my mom wanted me to come home, and it was because my brother had been killed. And feeling that pain, through the universe, feeling that validation of my telekinesis that I have with my twin, it really did a number on my mental health, because it wasn't just everything I was going through, but it was the fact that my fears had been validated, my intuition had come to fruition, and so it really had messed with my mind and has messed with my mind for years, where if something occurs to me, if I start to feel a fear of something traumatic happening again with one of my loved ones, it feels very similar to that because of my fear of being right again, sadly. And so one of the things that I noticed over the years, and that I still do to this day sometimes, is that I'll try to diminish, I won't say diminish my love, but almost hide it. I will consciously hide my love for my loved ones. And again, too, I've alienated myself from a lot of my friends that I've known for years and years, and since I was a little kid, and I'm always putting off talking with them and meeting up with them and being vulnerable and talking about where I'm at and the things that I've been through. I think I still have friends to this day that I haven't told about my father and what he did. And so again, just self-reflecting on that and trying to understand why I did that and understand why I kind of pushed my loved ones away. But I say subconsciously in many ways I have. And one of the things that I realized was that, with my twin, I didn't hide my love for him. I didn't hide my love from the universe. I felt like, my heart was and that's one of the things that I connected with, was I felt like my love for my twin actually caused his death. And I know that's not a rational way to think, but that's just something that I felt. And again, I don't feel like I could be the only one. I don't think that's necessarily super common. I don't know, because my twin brother is the only person that I've ever lost in a traumatic way. And again, too, that bond of being a twin is going to be different than other people. And so I don't know if that's something that people can resonate with. But again, I feel like it's important for people to self-reflect and realize the impact and understand why they're thinking a certain way, rather than just try to justify it and say, well, the reason I think this way is because I was hurt. And that's true. But it's really important to understand the nature of it. And so for myself, like I said, I noticed that when I was pushing people away emotionally, and my loved ones and family and friends, a big part of it was the fact that I felt like the more I loved them, the closer the target I was putting on them. Not myself for myself, but just the fact that I felt like, I feel like it's almost, I want to say there was a movie called Jeepers Creepers, where the evil being only gained power based on your fear of it. And so that's kind of how for myself it was I felt like the more I feared about losing a loved one, the more I showed my love for them internally, even just internally, just consciously. I felt like if I fully embraced them, was vulnerable wholeheartedly, that I felt like that was one of the sources of why my brother was targeted from the universe, so to speak. And again, I just don't feel like I could be the only one who thinks that way. I don't think, again, that it's super common. But again, I just, how I put it is if there's someone in your life that's a loved one that is acting abnormally, who's pushing you away, who's, not being very affectionate, or not being very open about their love, or very distant, or almost rash and lashing out at you. Not in every case, because again, you have to look at everything that makes up their mental health, makes up what makes them tick. But I feel like a lot of the times when people are pushing people away, it's not because they don't love you. It's not because you're not worth their love or whatever. I think a lot of times it's because of that. They're terrified to lose you, and so by diminishing or I say I guess diminishing is okay. By diminishing their love for you, it's not going to hurt as much. I wrote a paper when my twin brother was deployed. I wrote a paper in the local Montana State University my freshman year in college, and I entitled it Nick, which was my twin brother's name. And in it, there's actually a point where I specifically identify how my twin and I were the closest we'd ever been. And identify that the closer I let him into my heart, the more it's going to hurt if I lose him. And so again, like I still have that paper. And so reading that line just resonates with me, and resonates with the fact that I felt like, I felt guilty. I felt like because he meant so much to me, that's why he was taken from me. Because again, I feel like when traumatic pain, appears, when it presents itself in your life, it feels very personal. It feels very like you were targeted. And so again, you almost, at least for myself, you don't want to bring that positive attention on anybody, because you feel like the universe will target that person that you're loving unconditionally. And so it's not that I don't love my family unconditionally. It's not that I don't love my wife or my children unconditionally, but there certainly is parts where I feel myself not being fully vulnerable, not being fully myself, and expressing myself, and just embracing the fact of how much I love my family. And a big part of it, like I said, was just me realizing that that's what happened with my twin, and I don't want it to happen again, even if it means that I miss out. Because in my mentally wounded mind, that's how I looked at it. Was even though my loved ones are missing out because I'm not loving them how I should, I'm not letting them know how much they mean to me, I feel like the ultimate end goal is to protect them, even if it means that I have to be viewed as less loving. If that means that they get to live forever, then so be it. And so again, there's that point of, for myself, I'm not saying that's how we should look at life, by sacrificing our love for one another so that the universe doesn't target them. But it's just understanding why, because I feel like, again, explaining that to somebody in my life that hasn't gone through traumatic pain, they would look at that where you're just you're losing out. You're not, our relationship could go south. It could go sour because you're not really expressing fully how much you love me, and you're not being vulnerable. In my mind, again, like I said, I feel like I'm sacrificing my own happiness so that they can be protected. And again, with going through traumatic pain, that's what you wanted to do for your loved one, was you wanted to protect them for everything. And and do anything to protect them, even if that means that I go without. So again, it's just important to understand that, not to approve of it, but to just accept it. And that's, I know, a big part of one of the lessons I learned as I was trying to heal, was there's a difference between accepting something and approving it. Accepting it is just what it is. It's accepting it. It's not denying that it happens. It's not denying my feelings or my perspective. It's accepting it. Approving of it would be justifying what I do, be justifying my perspective and my fears, which is important not to do that. Again, it's okay to feel that way, because denying yourself feeling that way, a lot of times, at least from my own experience, when you deny your behavior, again, you start to self-loathe, you start to regret, which again, that just puts you in a depressed state of mind, which you're not going to heal in a depressed state of mind. So again, it's just important to self-reflect and to examine your perspective and your fear and what motivates that. And again, it's very scary to talk to people, loved ones, people that have pronounced their love for you. It's very scary to say what's really going on in your mind, because a lot of times it is misunderstood. It is thought to mean something that it isn't. But again, so a lot of times, for myself, what I learned was, talking about these perspectives and these thoughts with a therapist did me a lot of good, because she could give me her perspective and the people around me. And a lot of times when I was getting these thoughts out, I got more clarity and understanding of what I was meaning. So for example, there was points where I was talking about, people within my family and how they were reacting and their behavior and so forth. And that's when my therapist, wanted to give me perspective and said, well, just because you're reacting to the situation this way, just because, you're finding it, because you're not letting this pain control you in this way doesn't mean they can't have it control them in that way. And that was when I got perspective and realized, well, the thing that's bothering me isn't that they're acting this way, it's that I feel like they're judging my actions. That's the thing that got me. Wasn't that they weren't acting as I thought they should act. It was the fact that they had their own, I don't want to say quirks, but their own pain and how it influenced their decisions. And I understood that. I have full sympathy for my family and decisions they've made or haven't made because of their pain. I understand that pain can control our actions in many, many significant ways. It was just that the thing that was bothering me wasn't their actions. It was the fact that I felt like my actions were being judged. What I was doing and how it impacted me wasn't being accepted. But that's the thing, was that I didn't make that realization until I got it out, got feedback, and really thought about what that statement meant to me. And so again, it's just important for people who are suffering mentally with traumatic pain and who have mental wounds to examine, and again to examine and get these feelings out with somebody who's going to be empathizing, who's going to be able to give them feedback, but not have a personal investment in what that means. They're going to be able to be objective rather than just think emotionally, because again, it's very understandable to think emotionally when you find out that your loved one is very sad and feels lonely, even though they have loved ones, they have you, but that's not what they mean. That was something that I expressed, was that I felt alone in the world. And again, my understandably, my wife didn't understand that, because I had my children, but that wasn't what I was saying. I wasn't saying that they didn't have value and they didn't bring value in my life. It was just me saying that when depression gets a hold of me, that's how I perceive life. Is I see all these beautiful things, I see my beautiful family, and I feel empty. And it's not the fact that they don't fill my heart. It's just the fact that that's a very defeating feeling when you are given every reason to be happy and you can't feel it. It feels impossible. It feels like learning the most difficult language in a day. Like it's not going to happen. And so, feeling that emotion is something I need to get out. But again, I understand that talking to somebody who hasn't been through traumatic pain, what I say and my feelings are going to be misperceived. And again, too, that's something where both sides are justifiable in their position of how they feel. Because again, they're going at those statements with their own perspective. And again, that's why it's so important to self-examine and to, again, do so. Again, and I think a big part of it that does help is a neutral party, to where somebody can be objective and not have personal emotional investment. Because again, too, that bouncing your thoughts and your internal emotions and your feelings off to somebody allows you to get a healthier perspective. And again, too, a lot of times that could also help you with how you communicate that pain when you do talk to your loved one about it. Because again, I know the crucial aspect of that. Because again, when I open up about those personal things and they were misperceived, I felt wounded. I felt discouraged because I'm like, I don't want to talk about my pain, because when I do, it's misinterpreted, it's misunderstood. And so I just kind of validate that reason of why I don't talk about my pain, rather than just realizing that if I was in that person's shoes, if I was in my wife's shoes, and this was being presented to me, and I, again, with, let's say my twin hadn't died and she had lost a loved one, like I would have that bubbly, rainbows and sunshine perspective on life like I did before my twin was killed. And so just making that distinction of identifying where people are coming from is really important. And again, as much as my pain is real and my emotions are real, my feelings are real, that's something that being objective, I can see, I can understand why my wife wouldn't understand that, why she would perceive what I was saying as this not appreciating what God has blessed me with, not appreciating my life, not appreciating my wife and my children, because again, that wasn't what I was saying. But again, if I hadn't been through the pain I had been through, that I wouldn't. That was one of the things that's compelled me again to make this channel and to talk about mental health. Is if those things hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't be here. I might be volunteering and helping out. I've always been an empathetic, giving person, but I didn't comprehend the magnitude and the impact that traumatic pain can have. Excuse me, and how just how people can look at life and feel so lost and feel so bleak. I didn't perceive that at all. I didn't have any type of I didn't have any type of rational or again too, when because I'd see people that committed suicide before my twin was killed. I'd see people who were suffering from depression or and anxiety and antidepressants and all this stuff, and I didn't understand why. But again, I was looking at life through my own eyes, through my own experiences. And so when I experienced traumatic pain, I was exposed. I saw this world that was just defeating, that was encumbrance. How I put it is, so for those people who have seen the movie Constantine, I feel like that's how the depressed mind looks, is when he goes into hell, I think it is, or into the dimension of hell. Is I feel like everyone who is in a healthy state of mind or hasn't been through traumatic pain, sees the world around us. They see all this beauty in with animals and with people and with the mountains and so forth. They see this positive world, and they're whistling along, and then the person who's going through traumatic pain sees that hell on earth, and that's the world they see, and that's what they perceive, and they're terrified. But everyone around them doesn't see it, and so they see no validation for this fear. They just see somebody, I say, being mentally weak. Like I said, just that stigma of mental health, where people just think that there's something wrong with you, and it's like, well, I feel like there's something wrong with all of us. So again, that's why it's so important to talk, and it's not just to simply be aware of mental health, but to understand it and to really reflect and to look at the individual aspects of it. Just because that's one thing I've learned. It's just because this is how I see life. Just because my influences of what's happened to me and how that controls or influences my outlook on life and how I move forward, doesn't mean that somebody who's been through a similar or even identical situation, I know I'm not the only twin this twin. I know I'm not the only twin this twin from the Afghani-Iraq war. So again, I know that even though I'm not the only person that's gone through what I've gone through, that it's important for me to talk about what I'm going through and how it's reacted or I've reacted and how it's affected me. Because again, I feel like there are people out there who that will resonate with, or at the very least part of it will. And so that will get their wheels turning and get them self-reflecting and thinking about how it impacts them and how they're misunderstood when they try to talk. And that's why they don't talk anymore. Because again, I feel like that's the ultimate negative cycle and impact of the lack of understanding of mental health and depression, is that I feel like so many people aren't getting help because of how pain is perceived in this country and how people think of the statement mental health. And like I said, I feel like when people say, someone suffers from mental health or mental illness or depression, people start taking the sharp objects and dragging them away, and people start thinking of padded cells and heavy antidepressants and so forth, and they just really have a misunderstanding of what that means and how many people it affects. So again, I feel like the more people that can talk about it, the more people that can add their perspective and their pieces of the puzzle, the clearer picture we can get of what the resolution will be, what the healing process will be. But again, super important for people to be able to talk about it and not be afraid of saying how they feel or how they perceive life, even if it's painful. But as always, good luck and good night.